What's up, guys? Welcome to the video, BRANDuary Day 8. Listen, if you're going to accomplish new things in 2026, big things, things that you have not yet been able to accomplish, you're going to need to raise your standards. And I'm talking about big things and small things alike. I'm going to tell you how you can do it in the video. So Jay, I've been coming to you for what, 8 years?
Yep, 8 years.
So I come here to define with Jason every time because talking about standards, like I'm particular about my hair, like I have a pretty high standard for a haircut, and he holds himself to a really high standard of like giving a quality cut every time. Like there's never a time where he just mails it in, does a quick cut job and gets you out of the chair. So I value people with high standards because I hold myself to high standards. And again, if you want to go to new levels, achieve things you haven't yet achieved, you're going to have to raise your standards, because what I found is that we often get in life what we tolerate. So if we tolerate low standards and we have low expectations, that's a lot of times what we'll get. All right, the cut is done. It's all fresh, just the way I like it. And you might think that a haircut is a silly example of raising your standards or why you should raise your standards, but I don't think that it is at all. I think that ultimately your life is a reflection of your standards. So in a world where most people are going to require more of you, I think we should require more of ourselves, and we should hold ourselves to really high standards first. I always speak about this in terms of attention to detail. I hold myself to high standards with the way that I dress. Now, some of you guys know that I like to wear the same things. I've minimized my options when it comes to what I'll wear, but the stuff that I'm wearing definitely meets my standard. And I think it's important to hold yourself to those high standards in every area. I don't ever want to show up and be underdressed or looking disheveled. I think that the way you present yourself speaks a lot to other people about who you are and the standards that you hold yourself to. So something as simple as a haircut, to me, that's an example of having high standards and raising your standards. And I think ultimately, like, this will permeate all throughout your life in different ways. The energy that you live with, the results that you're willing to accept, the way you treat people, the excuses that you'll make. If we raise our standards, not just our goals, then ultimately we can really reshape our world, the reality that we live in. So many people talk about raising the level of their goals, setting higher goals for themselves, but they don't talk as much about the importance of raising your standards. If you're going to raise your goals, and like I said in the intro, if you want to accomplish things that you've never accomplished or go places that you've never been, it's great to have a goal to do that, but you're going to have to raise your standards for yourself. You're going to have to raise what you will tolerate with yourself and say that we will no longer tolerate half-ass commitment, half-ass energy. We got to go all in. We're not going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's an example of raising your standards, and I think that's reflected in everything that you do in life. I love this machine right here because it takes a lot of the stress off my knees and off my lower back. And at this point in my life, as much as I've been working out, as much football as I played, my knees and lower back feel it if I do like a legitimate squat, something with like a bar on my back. So when I do those, I do them a lot lighter. But on this machine, I can put a little bit more weight on it, hit the quads and the glutes from a different angle, and it takes all that stress and pressure off my knees and off my low back. So when I've got any kind of like overhead shoulder press, I'll either use one of these machines or I'll do dumbbell military press. So I like to mix it up, but I try to stick to the machines more often than not, just because at this point, Last thing I want to do is tear a rotator cuff or tear a labrum or injure my shoulder trying to do heavy dumbbells. So I like the machines because they keep everything stable, and I can avoid shoulder injuries that way. The other thing I love about this full body workout so much is that I was just over on a leg machine working legs, so my heart was having to pump all that blood to my legs. Now I'm doing upper body, so it's got to work extra hard to pump all that blood up to my shoulder. So my heart rate stays really high, which means I'm gonna burn more calories. So in this workout total, I've already burned 550 calories, and I'm like 30 minutes in. That was jump rope and the weightlifting part of it. So I'm crushing this right now. My heart rate's high and I'm burning a lot of calories, which is obviously the goal.
Something's wrong with this. This burning love I ain't seen before, and I don't know if I can handle it anymore. Would you let me know? Can't take heartbreak for us so long. Yeah, baby, won't you let me know? 'Cause I'm still stuck on you. Would you let me know? Can't take heartbreak for us so long. Yeah, baby, won't you let me know?
This is another perfect example of moving the blood around. So I did the leg exercise, then 2 upper body exercises, the overhead shoulder press, then the lat pull down. Now I'm back to RDLs. So the blood is moving all over. My heart rate is really high, and I burned over 1,000 calories now, like 50 minutes into this workout. So good stuff. All right, last thing here, I'm gonna finish with these leg raises. This is probably my favorite ab exercise, just because it gives you kind of the crunch effect, but it's also really good for like your transverse abdominis, like your core, your pelvic floor and all that stuff. So this is my go-to preferred ab exercise. Three sets of 10 of these and I'll be done. All right, the workout's done. I wanted to video that today just as another example of the high standard that I set for myself in terms of prioritizing my health and fitness. So I want to differentiate here between a goal and the standard. So the standard for me is not to get to the gym 6 days a week. That's a goal that I have that helps me achieve and maintain the standard of placing a high priority on my health and fitness. The gym is just one way that I do that, or that you can do that. Other goals that you might have around placing a high priority on your health and fitness, your diet. I do things like cold plunge occasionally, sauna, massage, chiropractor, all of those type of things. Get blood work done frequently to make sure that all my levels are good. That's the standard, is a high priority on my health and fitness. Getting to the gym 6 days a week or as often as possible is a goal that helps me achieve and maintain that standard, because the reality is I don't always get to the gym 6 days a week. There's times if I'm traveling, obviously if I'm out of town, or if I'm sick or under the weather, I don't make it 6 days a week. That's just a goal, and I don't always hit that goal. But I try to always maintain the standard of placing an extremely high priority on my health and fitness, trying to be as healthy and fit physically, mentally, and emotionally as possible. I love Zupas, that's good food, but I will say one of the areas where I could definitely raise my standard is in the food that I eat. I don't eat terrible, but it's definitely not great. I definitely don't hold myself to the highest standard on my diet, so I need to do better in that area for sure. One of the more important ways that you can raise your standards is to raise the standard for what you will allow or what you will tolerate. I've heard that quote years ago that says, you deserve what you allow. And in a lot of ways, I think that's true. If we continue to allow ourselves to be sloppy in our execution, undisciplined, half-ass committed or uncommitted, if we allow ourselves to ignore or overlook some of the small details, some of the finer points, then we don't deserve to get the outcome that we want. We don't deserve to get the A on the test. We don't deserve to have the great body that we're hoping for. We don't deserve to get the promotion that we're looking for if we're allowing and tolerating significantly less than our best from ourselves. So that's another reason why I think this is so powerful. Raising the standard with yourself means evaluating what you will continue to allow and tolerate, or maybe better stated, what you will no longer allow and tolerate. And that also pertains to our relationships. Think about what we allow or we tolerate in our relationships. We allow ourselves to remain in relationships where we're mistreated, where we're not valued. We allow ourselves to remain in relationships that are toxic, that are not good for us. We tolerate people treating us far less than what we deserve. We tolerate less than other people's best. We allow ourselves to remain in situations that drain us, that don't serve us, that don't fill us up. There's so many areas that we could evaluate in terms of what we will allow and what we tolerate. And I think getting clear on those things, setting those hard boundaries and telling yourself, look, I will no longer allow this, I will no longer tolerate that. Huge game changer. One of the biggest evaluations that you can make, particularly in a new year, but anytime. All right, I'm home now after a long day, great day, but a long day. So appreciate you guys rolling along with me and kind of hanging out with me for today. A couple last things I want to say here about raising your standards, about building this habit of raising your standards. One last thing that I want you to understand and accept is that raising your standards is going to cost you. There's a price to pay for that. You're going to lose potentially some relationships. You're going to lose the approval of people in your life. You're going to lose some of your comfort. You're going to have to get outside of your comfort zone and experience some discomfort if you're really going to raise your standards and set those hard boundaries with yourself and with other people. But I think the important part is that you're going to gain clarity. You're going to gain momentum. You're going to gain more self-respect. And you're going to gain pride in yourself for setting those standards and enforcing those boundaries. And I think those are really important things. So with that, I want to give you a couple ideas here on things you can do specifically to raise your standards and start to build this habit. The first thing is you got to think about raising the floor, not the ceiling. Oftentimes, people try to raise the ceiling, and what I mean by that is they shoot for peak performance. They shoot, hey, I'm going to raise my standard, and that means I'm going to try to hit perfection, and that's not what we're trying to do here. I talked about that earlier with the workout thing. Getting to the gym 6 days a week is not my standard. That's my goal. And so with raising the floor, what I'm saying is, hey, I get to the gym as often as I can. For me, that's 6 days a week, but there are times when I can't do that, when that doesn't happen, when I'm traveling or when something more important, quite frankly, comes up. There are times when there's things in the moment that are more important than me getting to the gym. And so think about raising the floor instead of raising the ceiling. We're not shooting for perfection here. We're shooting for improvement. So while you're thinking about, hey, I've got these hard and fast rules now, these boundaries and these standards that I'm holding myself to, there is room for flexibility. There is wiggle room there, so to speak. But just make sure that when you do that, you're not compromising yourself and who you are to appease someone else or try to adhere to somebody else's rules or bend to somebody else's rules. So think about raising the floor. In other words, raise the standard in the sense of, my goal is to do this as often as possible, not the ceiling where it's like, it's got to be perfect, and if I don't hit that, then I'm a total failure. And the last thing here, how you can build this habit, is you need to make your standards visible and specific. What I mean by this is that oftentimes people's standards are basically just vague feelings or things that they think or feel. They'll say things like, well, my new standard is that I want better, or I want more, or I should be doing better, so I'm going to do better. I understand where they're coming from, but that's not really a standard. It's more of a wish. So for a standard to really be a standard, it needs to be observable. It needs to be binary. In other words, it is or it isn't, no gray area, and it needs to be enforceable. So an example of this would be turning your values into rules, like set hard and fast rules. So you would say, hey, my new standard is I no longer stay in conversations where I feel disrespected. I no longer stay in rooms where I feel disrespected or not valued. I don't stay in relationships where I feel disrespected or not valued. That's an example of setting a rule it's very clear. It either is or it isn't. It's binary. You're either staying or you're leaving. And then if you feel disrespected, if you feel like the standard's not being met, if you feel like the boundary's being crossed, then you enforce the boundary or the standard by leaving, by exiting the conversation, exiting the room, exiting the relationship. So one example there of how you can build the habit by making your standards visible and specific. They need to be very specific things, not vague hopes, wishes, and feelings. So guys, I'm going to wrap the video up there. As always, I appreciate you watching. If you're still watching to this point, give me a like and subscribe. Help me grow the channel. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow for day 9 of BRANDuary. See you then.